All right, ready?
Yeah.
5, 4, 3, 2. Hello, everybody. This is Travis.
Hello, everybody. This is Brandon.
And welcome to yet another edition of Interdimensional RSS, the unofficial Rick and Morty podcast. So happy you could be with us today.
Yes, sir. So happy indeed. Indeedly do.
Indeedly do. One thing that I'm noticing is you are paused.
Oh, yeah, that's okay.
On the stream. And so I don't know if you're actually up on the stream or not.
Yeah, well.
And I'm going to double check that, frankly.
Okay. Yeah, since we're at the beginning.
Yeah. Do some fancy eye movements or something. Okay. Yeah. So I just can't see you. I can see you up in the corner, but I can't see you here. So, okay. I'm going to stop Reaper.
Okay.
And stop this stream.
Cool.
All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody. This is Travis.
Hello, everybody. This is Brandon.
And welcome to yet another episode of Interdimensional RSS, the unofficial Rick and Morty podcast. So happy we could have you for yet another week of Rick and Morty. So Brandon, what's going on?
Not too much, Travis. Technical difficulties abound trying to get random shit to work between laptop and Macintosh and webcams and drivers, and I've never had so much of an issue with Windows PCs up until like 5 minutes ago.
It happens to the best of us. Brandon, are you free of con crud, or have you gotten any illnesses over the weekend?
I am not free of crud. It wasn't con crud, but it was crud nonetheless.
You just had crud over the weekend regardless. So, well, we'll get into your amazing Hawaii Comic-Con experience in just a few minutes. But first, if you're new to the show, or maybe you've been listening for a really long time and you want to get in touch with us, there's plenty of ways that you can do that. You can hit us up on Twitter at Rick and Morty Pod, over on our subreddit, rickandmortypodcast.reddit.com. Our website is apatheticenthusiasm.com/Rick and Morty Podcast. Send us an email at rickandmortypodcast@gmail.com. Hit our TeePublic site, apatheticenthusiasm.com/shop. And we're doing it. Our first video edition of the podcast is available to our Patreon subscriber who signed up at the $5 level. Head over to patreon.com/rickandmortypod if you'd like to support the show and get some cool perks like video versions of the podcast or your name written in HTML over on our website, apatheticenthusiasm.com. It's not in lights. I mean, I guess it's in lights if you're viewing it on a screen using some form of lights. I don't know how screens work.
And we could highlight it, I guess, and then it's like kind of. But
yeah, I don't know. It wouldn't work with the visual, design of the website.
Well, we don't want to focus too much of our efforts on that today, Travis. Well, why don't we move on? Why don't we move on into what we like to call our show,
and semi-pertinent news.
Oh yeah, I wonder, who writes semi-pertinent news? When I got that because I was bouncing my shoulders up for that. Our Patreon subscriber can see me bounce
they can see them shoulder bounces. So you ask who wrote the semi-pertinent news, but it was mostly you. It was mostly you this week.
Oh.
And first on the agenda is, of course, the amazing Hawaii Comic-Con panel. You hosted an Interdimensional RSS fan panel talking about Rick and Morty. How did it go, Brandon?
Yeah, it went fantastic. It went amazing. Yeah, I had it was Friday evening at 5:00, and I took a day off of work and I put together this fantastic presentation. Grab some clips off of YouTube for each character. Me and this stand-up comedian here locally, Co Snyder. We were gonna co-host this panel, talk about each character, and then do clips for each character. Right. Well, so I had this all on my laptop. I went to convention and got everything set up. I plugged in the aux port for the sound on my laptop, tested the sound, everything was fine. But we hadn't plugged in the HDMI adapter yet. Well, we plugged in the HDMI adapter, and as many people in the IT or general computer knowledge knows, when you do that, then the sound will then try to default to HDMI. So now I'm in the middle of the panel, and we're like, okay, cool, let's do the intro. And then there's no sound. And then I freak out a little bit. Eventually, the AV guys come up, and they help me troubleshoot it. And I was like, fuck, I'm so stupid. But it ended up like being really, really cool. There was about like 60, 70 people there, only about 10 people left. And just like when I did Rick and Morty the week before, like it's just so cool being around people who are laughing at the same things you're laughing at, and discussing, like we would ask questions of the audience and be like, what do you think about Rick, or what do you think about Morty? And there's this little kid who was probably like 10ish, and he like had the most insightful thing to say about Rick. And I was like, holy crap, maybe you should just host this panel, because you're, and also
why don't you come up here, you take a mic. Yeah.
But it was really, really cool. And then somebody asked me for an autograph, and I was like, I don't think you know who I am.
You're actually going to reduce the value of that object by having me sign it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But that's it. That was it. Thanks to Jimmy J and the amazing Hawaii Comic Con people for having us.
Yeah, and you got to see some various Rick and Morty cosplay out there. I think Pickle Rick showed up to the panel at one point. You were able to tweet out some of those pictures, I believe, over on our Twitter account. So if you haven't got a chance to check those out, head over there and take a look. In other news, no new show next week. We got the surprise little bumper at the end of last night's episode that Rick and Morty will be returning in 2 weeks, taking some time off over the Labor Day holiday here in the United States.
Labor Day.
I don't know if this is strictly a holiday related break, or if maybe there was a need for some catch up with the animation process and things like that. I'm not going to make too many assumptions, but regardless, there will be no new Rick and Morty episode next week. I think we'll still have a podcast episode though.
Yes,
and we are planning right now. Hopefully we can get a guest on here. If not, we could definitely do a mid-season recap and kind of catch us up to speed on things that we may have missed during these rapid fire episodes. That we don't have time to reflect.
We don't,
and now we can kind of look at the episodes as a whole. So no new episode next week. Final bit of news, something I saw today that I am very excited about, Brandon. In the world of Funko Pops, it was announced that there will in fact be not one but two versions of Pickle Rick Funko Pops. You can check these out online. We'll have a link in the show notes. But yeah, so you will have Pickle Rick when he's fighting the rats, and he's got like the screw hands that he's like killing rats with. It almost looks like he's flipping the Peace Among the Worlds double birds, but with screws. And then there's also the Pickle Rick version that has his laser cannon that is powered by AA batteries. So he's got his laser cannon over his shoulder and a AA battery in the other hand.
Yeah.
Very, very cool looking pop vinyls. I definitely want to get my hands on them. But they will not be released until this December. So a little bit longer to wait, but very excited that we'll have actual, manufactured action figures. Not action figures, but, collectibles.
I mean, they could be action figures, like any figure that you have can be made into it.
The way I play with them, they will be.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I mean, I haven't seen them, but I trust based off of your description that they're cool looking.
Yeah, they look like pop vinyl versions of Pickle Rick. Like
I picked up Doofus Rick Funko this week.
Very nice, very nice. All right, well, that is the news. It is now time to transition into everyone's favorite part of the show. It's time for the main thing.
Woo! Talking Terry Folds, that's the jam that I like. It has nothing to do with the main thing, but it's in there. Whoa, man.
All right.
I'm laughing. I've messed that up so hard, and it's my favorite one now because I jacked it up. Okay. Anyway, well, hey, welcome everybody. I'm Brandon, and this is Travis. we're talking the main thing, and this episode is episode 306, obviously. Rest and Ricklaxation, written by Tom Kaufman and directed by Anthony Chun and Wes Archer. Travis,
That's right. All right. So this episode, after a quote quick adventure, spirals out of control and into an epic 6-day event. Rick and Morty find themselves exhausted and in need of a break. A trip to an interstellar day spa provides them with a chance to detoxify, and as a result, they are separated from all of the negative aspects of their personality. The toxic Rick hatches a plan to swap places with detoxified Rick and Morty, and when his plan fails, he seeks to toxify the entire world. This episode explores how life would change for Morty if he lacked the self-deprecating and awkward aspects of his personality. While Rick is eager to be whole again, it takes a little bit longer for Morty to come around. There's a lot other stuff to unpack in this episode, and I want to do that. But overall, what was your feeling in this episode? It was a pretty classic Rick and Morty episode, in my opinion.
I watched it a couple times, and I'm still having, I would say, trouble deciding how I ultimately feel about it.
Okay.
I like it, but I don't know. I'm unpacking some feelings, Travis.
You've got the feels right in that middle of your chest where the feelings happen.
No, middle of my chest is in the Interdimensional RSS shirt. And just to let you guys know, sorry, this is a tangent. I know this. I apologize. But Travis and I are both wearing the same shirt, and it's kind of awkward. Okay, moving on.
Yeah, it was unplanned.
like I was. That's also not true. No, I like the episode, and I like. I think my issue, and I think we'll get into this, is like Rick is so the detoxified Rick is so like kind of passive aggressive. Well, not even aggressive. Like he's just passive.
Yeah.
For a lot of the episode, and all of a sudden he switches, and I don't feel like the switch necessarily got earned, but I think that's like my main issue with the episode.
Yeah, it is weird, and it is a unique sort of episode in that we are following a version of Rick and Morty that is not it's not true to the traditional characters that we're used to seeing, and I think that I don't know if because we've got so used to how Rick and Morty normally behave on an episode that seeing this new version, it doesn't feel like we're watching the right characters. I don't know. And I understand that that's the point. But I don't know. It just didn't. There are times when it's cool to see Rick be like really, polite and not try to be rude. But at the same time, like you want that other aspect of Rick. And I think that's sort of the type of character that we appreciate in the show. So,
right.
What did you think particularly of the toxic versions of Rick and Morty? It's interesting how we're introduced to them, because after they go through the detoxifier, it immediately switches to the toxic versions, and we're sort of led to believe that that's just the process that they got put into, and we aren't really made aware that there's a splitting of the two personalities until the end of the toxic scene. What did you think of those versions of the characters?
When they first showed up, like I didn't notice anything weird about Morty, other than him being, green and gloopy. But he like complaining and whining. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's Morty. And then Rick, I noticed him being like super aggressive, and I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And to think that the Rick is like his toxic part is this part that makes him like have a god complex and make him feel better than everybody else. I thought was interesting. And then to cap it off at the very, very end of the episode with him being the one who actually cares about Morty.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting. We discover halfway through the episode that the machine itself doesn't determine what aspects of their personalities are toxic. It's based on the individual, and it's the aspects of their personality that they themselves feel are negative that gets removed. And so that to me was really fascinating to kind of see which aspects Rick deep down feels are like a detriment to himself.
Yeah.
Because those are the things that ultimately end up being part of toxic Rick. So yeah, the burping, the farting, the God complex, all of those things, sure, he has an issue with. But it was interesting to me that he also felt like his attachment to Morty was in some way a negative aspect of his personality.
Yeah, and that I don't feel like maybe that's the part that kind of makes me pause a little bit, that the toxic Rick is the one that has the attachment, right? Because like leading up to that point in time, after the spa, and after Rick is just, they're in the spaceship and they're listening to Terry Folds on the radio, like everything is just like very like calm, and he's he doesn't act like he doesn't care about Morty, right? He's just I don't know. It doesn't feel like he doesn't care. I don't know. I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll agree with you. And I think for me, actually, a lot of my issues came more with the two versions of Morty. I think probably after the second time viewing it, I really came to understand how the things about Morty that he didn't like in himself, and why that resulted in the healthy version of Morty that we got in the main storyline. I understand that he doesn't like his timidness, his self-deprecating behavior, his sort of meek personality, his subservient like attitude towards Rick, and then all of those things really became what toxic Morty was, this helpless ball of self-loathing. But what that resulted in, yeah, healthy Morty seemed more confident and more outgoing and able to help folks, but he also didn't have like a limiter on himself. So he had no buffer to say like, hey, maybe I'm coming on a little too strong. Maybe I am pushing it a little too far. And that I think was the ultimate issue with his personality in the healthy form.
Yeah, that he's pushing on too strong. And I think I have two thoughts that go with that. One is, I think that it's interesting that regardless of him not knowing when to pull back, right, with Jessica being the key example, and then him going up to the bar and talking to that chick, I think it's Samantha or maybe, and then of course, like then him doing the whole Wolf of Wall Street stuff at the end, selling so many stocks or whatever he's I'm not
whatever he's doing.
Yeah. And just seeing like how people around him buy into that. Like, yeah, Jessica, she wasn't about that that type of Morty, but how many people in the world were and are okay with somebody being so straightforward and straight shooter and being like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, the lady that he's dating at the very end of the episode referred to him as like the perfect guy, despite the fact that he's a teenager. But just the way that he didn't hold back and that he was confident and things like that, I think are all aspects of a person that we can admire, we can appreciate. But I think that the lack of balance causes what ultimately happens, where Morty decides to allow himself to be found by Rick so that he can be combined with the toxic version of his personality.
Yeah. And the other thought I had was, it reminds me of the Codependent episode with Beth and Jerry, right? Where it shows their monster versions of themselves. And this episode is very reminiscent of that, just with Rick and Morty instead. And so we should see a crossover episode, is basically what I'm saying, with the family all in their monster versions.
Absolutely. I want to get into some of our favorite bits in this show. There wasn't like an A plot, B plot setup for this episode. It all kind of followed the same main storyline. But there were a lot of really cool moments in this episode. So let's start off with what you alluded to in the segment song, but that Terry Folds hit, like what did you think of the song, and also the first interaction in the spaceship where we're throwing on shuffle and just talking about music.
That Terry Fold song that I didn't realize that it was played in the spaceship the first time I watched it, and then it got to the credits, like then I listened to it and I was like, oh wait, is that in the credits? And it cracked me up, and the whole commentary on, like, I know I have like the same playlist for everything, right? That I just like go through over and over, and it never changes. And when I was a kid, I was like, no, I love music. Why don't people love music more? And then I got older and I was like, nah, I'm just set in my ways. So the whole shuffle
I know
thing,
what I like.
yeah, the whole shuffle thing, like absolutely. And I found some really cool music just playing like Rock Band, because it's forced me to play different songs. But that Terry Fold song, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I really like when Rick does his whole, like, I wonder if I could come up with an algorithm to perfectly determine like how often you could find great songs, and like, oh, look at me go trying to find an algorithm for happiness or something like that. Like, just that moment with this version of Rick was cracking me up. I just loved that exchange so much.
Yeah. Okay. And that goes back to, I didn't feel like the ending felt right, because he's trying to be happy. He's trying to make an algorithm to be happy, and I don't know. That wasn't totally earned. But Terry Folds, check this out. It's on iTunes. It's on Apple Music, and it's on Spotify.
It's on Spotify. Yeah.
Ooh. Oh, so good.
Grab my Terry Fold flaps. Grab my flappy folds. Grab my Terry Folds. Grab my foldy flaps.
Okay, so Chaos was were the ones who helped out with that, and you may recognize their music from season 1.
Yeah, and then Justin Roiland in there with dropping the lyrics for those Terry Folds.
Terry Flaps, son of a
Terry
bitch.
Flaps, that's right. One of the other things I really got a kick out of in this episode was when the two versions of Rick are fighting throughout the house. Most of that scene was great. I really enjoyed all of the hidden, like, traps and objects that Rick has hidden throughout the house, including multiple versions of some sort of gun that can shoot his DNA into another organism that he can then, be birthed out of.
Yeah, that he aliens, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. But the other thing in that scene that was really interesting to me is that Summer's in the house. She's watching Mrs. Pancakes on TV, and when they are fighting, both versions of Rick are sort of apologetic towards Summer that they're interrupting her, and then also when Beth comes home, they both have the same attitude about, like, all right, let's not involve her, let's not get in her way. So, which to me feels like that those interactions, but with those people, are sort of fundamental to Rick, regardless of, like, which aspect of his personality. That's a constant. Would you agree with that, or because it seems to? Go ahead.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that whether or not we consider things toxic or not, I think that whether if it's an evil side of you or a good side of you, if you're acting the same way, if your doppelganger is reacting the same way, then yeah, that has to be kind of a fundamental feeling for you towards those people. Which, I mean, says a lot about Morty then, right?
Right, because I think the two versions of Rick treat their Mortys in pretty distinctly different ways. So I don't know if that means that there's still some sort of special bond, I guess you could say, or unique version of the relationship that he has with Morty that causes the different aspects of his personality to be split based on that, or what. But he the two Ricks didn't treat their Mortys exactly the same. And so I feel like there is still some sort of, maybe there's more dimensions to his relationship with Morty that cause those fractures and make him act differently.
That we're being led on to, right? What I was gonna say about Rick and Morty, both versions, like in that living room scene, where Morty, who is toxic Morty, who is completely subservient, he gets in the spaceship and he's like, "Okay, Rick, I got you." The jar, the tube. Or
I got the tank. Yeah.
And like that, even when he's just pussified, he's still doing. He's still going out his way to do Rick's bidding, right?
Yeah, and he's not helpless, per se, but he's essentially doing whatever Rick wants him to do, which I think is part of what Morty doesn't like about himself, is that he is so often willing to just do whatever Rick wants instead of standing up for himself and doing his own thing, which we see at the end of the episode when he doesn't go along with Rick's plan, but he jetpacks off to New York City.
Yeah. I'm a healthy enough man to admit that, Rick. Yeah. I what at the very end, right? Morty talks to Jessica, and he's like, "Yeah, I know Rick's trying to track me on the phone," and then he doesn't hang up the phone. Like his reaction, I'm still trying to parse what his reaction means. Like when his girlfriend says, "Oh, you didn't hang up the phone," and Morty just he just goes, "Huh," and just like a blank stare.
I think it's also similar to when Rick first plays the audio clip from the toxic Rick who gets through to healthy Rick on the cell phone, and it's a great shot. It was one of my favorite of the episode, where there's like screaming and Rick's freaking out, and it's just a solid shot of like a blank-faced Morty just listening, processing the information, and then like blowing it off. But in this case, I feel like he's already made the decision that he's not happy with this version of himself. He thought this was the ideal version of himself, but he realizes that it's not the full aspect of his character. And while there are those things about himself that he doesn't like, that he considers toxic, they are still fundamentally part of who he is. And so I think, yeah, he wasn't as ready as Rick was to take on that other part of himself on the moon tower. About after 3 weeks of his life in New York City, I think he was ready to be like, you know what? Yeah, I want my old life back.
Interesting.
That's my take on it. I'd be happy to know what Unity thinks. Hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, and on Reddit.
When Rick, detoxified Rick, is showing the phone and saying, yeah, look, I think our other being, or our other side of ourselves are trying to get through or whatever. And there's a little bit where Morty is like, that'd be unhealthy, man, or whatever, to try to find him again.
Yeah.
There's talk out there that people are talking about evil Morty again. And really, this whole season is leading up to that point in time. I don't know. We don't know. But I mean, what do you think? Do you think like that is another piece of evidence towards that, or are we being led astray? Maybe like Game of Thrones does to people.
I don't necessarily think it's evil Morty. I'm still not convinced that the show bounces around different versions of Rick and Morty. I think every episode we see the C-137 version of Rick and Morty, and evil Morty is not the C-137 version of him. So I personally don't buy into the idea that certain episodes are precursors to a bigger conspiracy. I don't think evil Morty is necessarily out of the picture, and I think it's something that will be revisited on the show, but I think evil Morty will have his own clear either backstory or his own sort of ambitions and motivations. I don't think it's it's going to be something that slowly is drawn out through C-137. I don't buy into that. Sorry.
You don't do it, and that's fine. That's difference of opinion. Trap. I'm not saying my opinion's different from yours, but some people's are probably different.
I'm sure some people are. Couple of stray observations from this episode. One of the things that I noticed was how much more on Jessica's radar Morty is by the end of this episode. You could argue that he's gone to a school dance with Jessica, but that was in another dimension, and that Jessica was Cronenberged long ago.
Yeah.
In this current dimension, and where they have taken up residence, this Jessica really hasn't paid attention to Morty too much. He awkwardly talks to her at the very beginning and is somewhat blown off. But by the end of this, he's about to jump into a portal, and Jessica turns around and says hi to Morty and says she's happy to have him back. This whole season has been about character development across the board. What do you feel after seeing this episode about the development in the relationship between Jessica and Morty?
Maybe in the end of the show, by the end of the show, Morty will have hooked up with Jessica. Maybe even just like a kiss on the cheek, and that'll be the series finale, and it'll be so sweet. I think the part where he's in the penthouse at the end, and he's talking to Jessica on the phone, and he says, "Well, you didn't like me when I was healthy, right?" Something of that nature. I think that's an interesting line, and I know the question was about Jessica, but it sparked a thought of mine just about what is healthy in general. Like Rick saying, realizing that the machine can't tell what's healthy, what's toxic or not, and then the very, very end where the part about being healthy, what is healthy, and I think the writers are digging at that point very much so, even from the Pickle Rick episode as well, talking about therapy in that way. What do you think about this whole kind of therapy theme going on throughout the season?
It's interesting. I wouldn't. I think that therapy is a real part of a lot of people's lives, and I think it can be very useful for them to help discover aspects of themselves and process the hard times that they're going through. And really, I feel like the theme of divorce and sort of turmoil within the family has sort of been overarching throughout all 6 episodes of this season. So I think it is a good supporting concept to deal with, where they have gone through this life change and they're dealing with it in different ways. While they didn't point directly to the divorce in this episode, I think that the fact that they have been going really hard on adventures, as it's alluded to at the beginning, and they decide that they do need to take a step back and take a break, maybe is part of that idea that they've been running away from their feelings and running away from sort of who they are and the things that they're dealing with, and just escaping into these different adventures. So I don't know. I know therapy's cool. I think Dan Harmon talks about going to therapy, so maybe that's why he wrote it into a bunch of episodes on the series.
Yeah, I mean, therapy's cool. I've done it. It's fun. It's fun to talk to people unbiased.
Yeah, sure.
And then be like, yeah, you and your family are messed up. Like, yeah, things happen. Just let it roll. Roll the punches.
Any other stray observations from the episode you wanted to point out?
I wrote down Goopy Morty, but the toxic versions of them were like when Rick realizes that they're the toxins, and like part of Morty's face just droops off. Drips off. It's so kind of gross and nappy, and I loved it.
I really like that Beth referred to them as the booger versions of themselves.
Yes, absolutely.
There were some really great clips, sort of like one-off bits, when they do activate the toxin beam on the moon tower.
Oh yeah.
Some of the things and the clips that cut between different scenes, the church turning into like an orgy. the people running into even unhealthier foods, and then the children at the birthday party turning against the clown that was there. The thing about that is I really like how once the beam was turned off, all of those things kind of went back to normal, and everybody's just kind of like brushed off, like, "Well, that was weird," except for the birthday party. Their actions could not be undone, and the kids just started crying at their own violence.
And the kids, when they were toxic versions, they were all like oohing like chimpanzees, right? They're like ooh 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 ooh. Like was there like killing
they looked at what's their knockoff version of Lucky Charms, the
Strawberry Smiggles.
Yeah, it was reminiscent of that commercial.
Jesus, Mary, Joseph. Yeah, another like that's another hurts me, like the Jerry episode, the Whirly Durly conspiracy last week, with the brother shooting his sister in the head. Like it's just another.
Yeah, it's just
like I
the
laugh.
Darkest season yet, Brandon. It's the darkest season yet.
We have one thought from Unity over on Twitter at Chuck Punch. He was basically asking, he liked the episode a lot, but why did Healthy Morty annoy him so much? And then Jason Parker also added that he was a total douche, but hysterical, and maybe historical character though. Did Healthy Morty annoy the heck out of you, Travis?
I don't know that he annoyed me. I think his date with Jessica, I was really kind of, he was grinding a little bit in that, and I was just like, okay, like you're give her an opening to talk, like basic dating etiquette. I don't know. I could tell he was really, this would be a situation where he would be really excited and maybe just excited to kind of keep the conversation moving. But the fact that he was just like rambling on and on and on, like that part was kind of annoying to me. But the other parts didn't feel as annoying as much as just this like weird caricature of Morty where he didn't seem like himself, but it was just like a neat version that kind of was always positive.
Yeah. You're right about the dinner. Like that's the only part where I was like, it's a little bit not annoying, but like I've known people like that who just they talk and they talk and talk and they don't give you a chance to get your words in edgewise. And what I really liked about that exchange specifically is when Jessica's like, "Oh, I have a thing. Oh, why am I pretending? Like that's just rude." Like I thought that was a really good just line to toss in there, because so oftentimes I'm like, if I'm talking to somebody like that at work, which by the way, people who listen to this that I work with, none of you are like that. But like I'll be like, "Oh, hey, Chris, John over here has a question for you," and then John will start talking to Chris, and I'll like run off. I'll like scamper off. I'll scam.
Ha ha! You run away down the hallway.
Yeah.
I thought that was a nice touch. I also like the fact that Morty's reaction to it's like, hey, that's what first dates are for, just people are feeling things out, no sparks, no big deal, like let's just move on. And then he moves on over to the bar where he uses some pickup lines on, I think it was Stephanie or something like that. I wrote it down. There's a point where she asks if he's a child, and he says, "Only in the ways that matter, Stacy." And then he says "tink" as he like clinks glasses. Just like a total like skeezy guy. Like I don't know. It was that part was also a little rough, but
yeah.
Overall, I think he did have some annoying aspects to his personality, and I'm glad that they got it all sorted out. We have the old version of Morty back.
Yes, the old toxic version of Morty and Rick. By the way, at work they talk about like toxic relationships all the time, and like the first thought I had when they started talking about toxins was like, oh my god, I can't wait to tell my boss, who already makes fun of me for Rick and Morty.
I have a question for you, and if you, I didn't give you any prep work to do research, but when they get out of the cab and they're They're about to talk to Rick. They're like, let's ask my grandpa. He's a scientist. Hey, Rick, do you know anything about Benoit technology? I tried to do a Google search. I didn't find anything specific on it. Do you know what he's talking about? Or maybe Unity can hit us up and give us the answer.
I'll let Unity hit us up for that, because I caught that line on the second go around and I didn't look it up.
All right.
But what I do know is talking about docking at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Between the girls, and then being in the mouth. I know those two things. Not personally. I know
in both situations, we have the recurring character now of the girl that caused Summer to kind of go all crazy in that previous episode because she was dating Brad or whatever his name is. There.
Maybe that's why Brad Evan, right? Ethan.
That's his name.
Maybe that's why Ethan liked her. Maybe it wasn't the boobs, right? Maybe it was
just the weird stuff she's into.
Yeah.
Not that it's weird if you're into that. I'm not trying to judge you, Unity.
Yeah. Of course.
Anyways,
so yeah, I like the episode. Let us know what you thought on Twitter or Facebook or anywhere else. We both, I like the episode. I'm still processing some stuff, but
overall I liked it. I wouldn't say it was my favorite from the season, but good solid Rick and Morty episode for sure.
Yeah, good solid Rick and Morty episode.
Solid.
So now we talked about the episode, and it's that special time of every episode of Interdimensional RSS where we talk about listener suggestions and shoutouts.
First up, Patreon. Thank you to Keegan Egenbrock.
Yes.
Thank you for supporting the show and being the person who gets to watch the video version of this. Hopefully it comes out. You can definitely let us know if the video is not working, and we'll do our best to make those improvements.
This is for you, Keegan. This is for you. Okay. I just did something just for them. So.
Oh, okay. Over on Twitter, MoonBunny85 hit us up at the panel on Twitter.
Yeah. So Moon Bunny, he's probably not listening to this because he's not all caught up on Rick and Morty. But he hit us up originally and he's like, "Oh, you guys have a podcast?" And we said yes. And then he said, "Oh, you guys like talking about flappy buttholes, so that's cool." But he'd never seen Rick and Morty, so we recommended, "Hey, go watch the show." He started watching the show, and then he came to the panel on Friday, and then he's like, "Hello," and then so, anyways, hi. Hey, Carl.
I gotta say, kudos for checking out the podcast without any previous knowledge about Rick and Morty. If anyone else listens to this podcast yet doesn't watch the show, I would be fascinated to hear your thoughts and perspectives, because I have no idea why you're listening. But thanks very much all the same.
Sky Von Gola 11th. Rick's body isn't his own. It's all cybernetics. That was just a brief exchange. Basically, since in the premiere, Rick, C-137 Rick, he went into a different Rick's body, that all those cybernetics are the actual other Rick's cybernetics. And so I just threw out there, and maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't, that we haven't seen what Rick's been up to. He could have easily put those cybernetics in between the premiere and today. Thank you.
That's true. I don't know. I think Rick's got some other things up his sleeve aside from just a groin bot that protects his nether regions. All kinds of cybernetics, and he always talks about all kinds of stuff that he's got set up on himself and the Smith household as well. So he's always got stuff, kind of behind the scenes that we're not privy to until it's actually shown on the show.
Yeah, true that. Facebook, Jessie hit us up in a message and says she loves the podcast. So we've got that going for us. Thank you, Jessie. We've got a few reviews over there on the Apple Podcast, the old Apple Podcast, and also Stitcher. First, we have another 2-star review. Thank you still for being honest. Can't
another 2-star review with no note, but thank you for your honest feelings about the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Black as coal or black ass coal, or if you like Rick and Morty, you love these guys, I'm giving them my money. I support this heavily. We support you heavily.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Cole. From Spooters, great podcast, fellas. You guys have been added to my regular weekly podcast schedule. Thank you very much for keeping us in your playlist. Husker Drill, keep it going and ignore the haters. Yeah, haters. Haters, back off. Or don't. Keep listening. We appreciate haters, too.
Haters get hated. Players only love you when they're playing.
Yeah.
Fleetwood Mac.
Okay. Over on Stitcher, Wubba Lub, which awesome username. Good show when actually discussing Rick and Morty. They say that there are many good points brought up about the show. It's really interesting to hear more complex ideological plot points, but it takes so long to get to them. It seems that as the show has progressed, it has taken longer and longer to get to the Rick and Morty stuff, more random tangents. Sorry about that, Wubba. We will try to discuss Rick and Morty more. We're not going to abandon semi-pertinent news, but we'll just keep doing what we do. Yeah. Thanks for the review. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and you know, I know that sometimes Travis loses my leash, and then he has to try to.
I gotta reel you back in sometime.
I know that, and I try to stay as close to the show as I can. Sometimes I just have those thoughts. And they come in, and then they don't stop. It's like when you have that one sink in your house, and it just keeps dripping all night long, and you're like, oh well, let me get a wrench. Let me go down to the garage and grab a wrench, and then like you tighten the faucet, and then but the drip's still coming, so you're like, shit, I should go find a plumber. And so you go down to the yellow pages, and you're like, oh, these yellow pages are from 2002. I think they stopped printing the yellow pages. So then you're like, okay, well, let me get on Google, and then you're like, well, actually no, I have Yelp. My wife just put Yelp on my phone, so you go to Yelp, and you're like, okay, plumber services 24 hours, and then eventually she's like, go back to bed, Brandon. And I do. And then I go to sleep, and then we record the next day of Interdimensional RSS.
Yeah, it's pretty much just like that. So thanks very much to Wubba for your review, and everybody for your reviews. If you want to leave a review for the podcast, you can absolutely do that on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcatcher you frequent. If you don't use a podcatcher, well, cool. You're better at the internet than I am. So, but definitely give us a shout out.
How do you do it?
Yeah, I don't know. Go to the website, I guess. I don't know. Maybe they build their own RSS catcher. I don't know. You can let us know how you do it over at Twitter. But that's it. So as we said at the top of the show, despite Rick and Morty taking a week off, we will still make sure to have an episode available for you guys. So if there is something particular from the first half of season 3 that you think we missed and you want us to cover, shoot us a note on all of the links that we said at the top of the show, and we'll put together an episode for you, and it'll have Rick and Morty info in it, and maybe a couple of tangents as well.
Yes,
but thank you so much to everybody that listens, and until next week, I'm Travis,
and I'm Brandon. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.